Welcome everybody to the first webinar with Map the System Canada 2025. Map the System Canada is sponsored by ACCO and is in partnership with the Institute for Community Prosperity and the Skoll Centre at the Syed Business School, University of Oxford. My name is Ashley Dion, and I am the program lead for Map the System Canada. Map the System Canada is housed at Mount Royal University. Mount Royal University acknowledges the relationships to the land and all beings, the songs, stories, and teachings of the Siksika Nation, the Piikani Nation, the Kainai Nation, the Stoney Nakoda Nation, and the people of the Tsuut'ina Nation and the Métis. If you would like to stay updated on all things Map the System Canada and build connections with other systems thinkers, connect with us on LinkedIn and Instagram. Today's workshop is all about AI in systems thinking, ethical considerations and tools for educators and students. And our guest today is Mark McNees. So join me in thanking Mark for being here today. Let's get started. Over to you, Mark.
Great. Thanks for joining, everyone. I have a presentation, and then at the end, I'm definitely going to have time for, I have some discussion questions just to get your thoughts. I am more than happy to pause my presentation. If you want to digitally put your hand up, I will call on you. Hopefully this can be a little more free form, and all of you can we can have questions throughout. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So I'm a professor at Florida State University, and I've been involved with Oxford Map the System competition for about 5 years now. We've gone to the global final 3 times, I think, and hopefully we're going to go again this year. I had the opportunity to present in Oxford last spring about just AI and how it can be leveraged just in systems thinking. And then since then, just having conversations about ethical considerations. So just a disclosure, I am not an AI expert. I'm not a computer scientist. I'm just a user. I'm just a system thinking educator trying to facilitate a conversation to answer this question. Can AI tools enhance learning while maintaining ethical practices? And hopefully we can have that conversation a little bit later. I'm going to present some ideas that I have received by doing a survey of system thinking educators. So I'm going to be presenting what those systems thinking educators do or have done, but I'm still trying to collect responses, and if you could, I want students and faculty's input on this. So here's a QR code to the survey link, and give you a second to get your cameras out and scan that QR code. I would love to get your thoughts on just the use of AI and the ethics behind it. Give you a couple more seconds, and I'll have the QR code at the end as well. Great. So the key outcomes of today, hopefully students and educators will learn to evaluate AI tools for systems analysis critically. We're going to be going over 3 different large language models that use the same prompt. We're going to look at ChatGPT, we're going to look at Gemini, and we're also going to be looking at Claude and see how they handle the same prompts. We're also going to try to understand ethical considerations when using AI in academic work, and hopefully develop some practical skills for applying AI in systems thinking projects, navigate the balance between AI assistance and independent thinking, and master, hopefully, responsible AI usage in academic research and analysis. And we're going to be discussing at the end current perspectives from systems thinking educators on effective AI integration based on the preliminary results of the survey, considering ethical frameworks for students using AI in their coursework. How might we maintain critical thinking while leveraging AI capabilities? We're going to explore real-world examples of successful AI implementation in systems education and discuss practical guidelines for students to responsibly incorporate AI in their learning. So I actually want to start with the last question of the survey first. And the last question of the survey was, please share any additional thoughts on the role of AI in systems thinking. And one of the survey respondents said, please help. And that was kind of a theme. And I think that all of us are trying to get a handle on AI, how it can be used effectively, but also how can it be used ethically. So I want to go over a selected amount of survey results. Most of the survey respondents were people who've been teaching systems thinking from 5 to over 10 years, university professors. So one of the questions was, have you incorporated AI tools in your systems thinking curriculum? And 29% said yes, moderately. 29% said yes, minimally. And then 43% said no, but I am planning to. So what I saw in the overall survey, and you'll see in some of the results, that we're really at the beginning of the use of AI, and professors and instructors haven't really leveraged it yet. So if you're a student and you're here today, you may be in front of your professor on this by the end of our time together. So this is how they're using it in systems thinking. 31% are using it in initial systems mapping. 15% are using it for stakeholder identification and power dynamics analysis. 23% in feedback loop identification. 8% leverage, looking for leverage points in the analysis, and then 8% are using it a different way. And then we had a question, in your opinion, what are the appropriate uses of AI in systems thinking education? And 100% of respondents said initial brainstorming. 14% said verification of student work. 71% said generation of example maps. 43% said analysis of relationships, and then 14% said other. And then another question was, what resources would you need to effectively integrate AI tools in your teaching? And 71% said training workshops. So hopefully this is, if you're an educator, this will count as that. Best practice guidelines, 86%, and we're definitely going to cover that. Technical support, no technical support today, but 57% wanted that. Assessment tools, 71%, and also ethical frameworks, 71%. And we're going to be hopefully developing that a little bit later in our time together. So here are some open-ended responses that I wanted to share, a few of them from this question. What do you see as the primary benefits of using AI in systems thinking education? One educator said, I think they are great for initial explanation of concepts or brainstorming. It can help to highlight connections that students might not at first see or get them past initial writer's block. Second, if used properly, AI can save time, allow students to check their work, think more broadly, and give students a place to jump off from. And then finally, it's a good place to start. Solid prompts can get them thinking in a more complex way right off the bat. It addresses something like white canvas problems. Having a place to start to critique can be great. And then this other open-ended question is, what are some of your main concerns about using AI in systems thinking education? One professor said, my lack of knowledge. Another said, using it poorly. In other words, using it without understanding its limitations and without leaving yourself space for your own intuition and lateral thinking. Short-circuiting their basic writing and critical analysis skills. Underdeveloped research skills, the fact that students are often drawn to it because it's easier and they overuse it or misuse it. And we'll discuss that more in depth. And then some students see it as an end point. So Oxford actually has some AI guidelines, and since we're all working toward presenting at Oxford's Map the Systems after you guys pass Canada's competition, these are Oxford's guidelines that we will prioritize human creativity, curiosity, and judgment. Oxford reputation is based on trustworthiness of our research and communications, and will be transparent with each other and our audience about our use of AI and ensure that AI is not used to conceal or alter original intent or meaning. And then finally, as communication professionals, we are responsible for the content we produce. Therefore, any AI tool should be seen as a supportive mechanism to create value and enable productivity, with the recognition that output from generative AI is susceptible to bias, mistakes, and misinformation. Content should always be checked and edited appropriately. So, overarching kind of, if I can synthesize some of these ideas from the professors who took the survey and other students who took the survey and in Oxford, the repeated theme has been transparency and not concealing where it is from, and properly noting what you're using and how you are using it. Oxford has a transparency label. This is how, at Oxford, how they want it done. This content was generated with the help of whatever AI tool you used, and carefully reviewed by our team for accuracy and appropriateness. And I think at the beginning of what I tell my students, I think at this time in the use of AI, transparency is the key. We need to be transparent when we're using AI. We shouldn't be afraid of it. And what I believe is we are going to make mistakes. But if we're transparent about it and we're not trying to conceal it, I feel that the spirit of our community is going to be, hey, that's out of bounds. You're not in trouble. Thank you for being transparent. But as a community, let's talk about this, because this seems like an overreach or overuse or misusing this tool. So I want to go over some prompts of three different large language model answers in systems thinking prompts. The first prompt is this: I'm working on a systems thinking project and need to create a feedback loop. Create a feedback loop focusing on mental illness and homelessness. Please add plus or minus for each factor on the connection arrows. So again, we're going to be looking at that same prompt in the three different large language models, and it's going to be ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude. So here's the first one. This is what ChatGPT came up with. As mental illness increases, is followed by increased difficulty maintaining employment. As increased difficulty in maintaining employment increases, that leads to financial instability. As financial instability increases, that results in an increased risk of homelessness. As there's an increased risk of homelessness, that could lead to worsened mental health. As mental health worsens, that leads to an increased substance use. And it said that's an optional factor, which leads right back into worsened mental health, which shows us a vicious loop, right? Things are getting worse and worse. So, probably not the greatest loop ever, but it's a start. The next thing is I gave it a follow-up prompt, prompt 1A, and I asked it to create a visual for the systems map, and this is what it came up with. Now, when it came up with it initially, I was very, very impressed. And then I started reading it and realized it was a bunch of nonsense. So I'll give you a sec to kind of look at it, but it's full of things that are misspelled. It doesn't make any sense. It's a bunch of spaghetti and trucks and buildings and things like that. So this is a good example of a limitation of ChatGPT, and can be fooled, giving you something that's aesthetically like, wow, like if a student turned this in, my initial response would be, oh, wow, they really worked hard on this. And then starting to look at it and be like, I don't even, is this even a word? A fentanyl illness and and increased substance healness, so here's a really good example of ChatGPT kind of taking something and making it look good, but on a short reflection, it's really, really bad. The second one is Gemini, and Gemini basically responded in sort of the same way. It gave a list. So as mental illness increases, that leads to an increased risk of homelessness. As homelessness increases, that leads to an exacerbation of mental illness. As mental illness increases, that leads to increased difficulty maintaining housing. As an increased difficulty in maintaining housing, and it's kind of crazy wording, right? It should be decreased. So you're seeing here is a real limitation. We wouldn't, at least how I teach systems thinking and doing feedback loops, we would never put increased, have the modifier in the factor, right? Because it starts getting crazy, because if you read this as Gemini put it out, as increased difficulty in maintaining housing decreases. And that's kind of a brain scramble of what that even means. I mean, I'm sure we could figure it out, but there's double negatives in there and everything, and I'm not really sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So whatever, increased risk of homelessness increases as homelessness increases. Oh, whoops. Reduced access to mental health care decreases. Again, that's the wrong way, the wrong modifier. Reduced access to mental health care. Why does it keep doing that? And exasperation of mental health. So you can see Gemini didn't do that great of a job. Now, Claude. This is what Claude didn't even write anything. Claude just drew this. And as a feedback loop. And when I read it over, it seemed like actually a really good starting point. So as mental illness increases, difficulty in maintaining employment increases, as that increases, financial instability increases, as that increases, loss of housing increases, as loss of housing increases, limited access to healthcare increases, as that increases, deteriorating mental health increases. And then we have a choice to go a couple of different ways. We can go over to increase substance abuse, back to financial instability. You also, from loss of housing, can go to social isolation, to deteriorating, and then you can go from deteriorating health over to which, if I was doing this, it wouldn't be increased mental health, it would be a decrease in mental health. So it got it wrong there. So, but I would say on this first one, uh, all three models came up with something of interest, and probably Claude came up with something that was probably a pretty good starting point if you were really wondering, like, okay, are we on the right track or something like that. What I tell my students is to do the best they can first without using a model, and then put in their model and ask the model to give them feedback. And that seems to work pretty well. I don't see any hands, but let me pause really quick just in case anybody wants to have a question or chime in. They're all loving me talk. Sounds good. Well, professors love to talk, hear their voice. So here we go. So the next prompt is create an iceberg model. Hopefully you're all familiar with an iceberg model. Event, pattern, structure, mental model for the event of homelessness, mentally ill people. So this is what ChatGPT came up with. The event is obviously the tip of the iceberg, and that's visible homelessness of mentally ill individuals in cities. Public encounters with individuals experiencing crisis, increased emergency room visits and hospitalization, higher rates of incarceration for minor infractions, and public complaints and policy debates on homelessness. So, real good. I think that's a real good start. ChatGPT did a great job with that. So the patterns would be chronic homelessness among those with severe mental illness, frequent interaction with law enforcement and the legal system, difficulty maintaining employment and stable housing, insufficient access to mental health services and medication, growing numbers of unsheltered homeless due to policy shifts. So pretty solid as well. Structure, deinstitutionalization policies leading to fewer long-term psychiatric facilities, lack of affordable housing and supportive housing programs, gaps in healthcare coverage and mental services, criminalization of homelessness rather than treatment-based approaches, and underfunding of social services and community support networks. So definitely structural causes there. And then the final one, the mental models, belief that individuals are responsible for their homelessness, stigma around mental illness leading to policy neglect, prioritization of short-term fixes over systemic solutions, misconceptions that mental illness alone causes homelessness, ignoring economic and structural factors, and then finally, societal view that productivity determines worth, marginalizing those unable to work. So overall, you probably would agree that ChatGPT did a pretty good job at articulating at least the framework of an iceberg model. Then I went and gave it the second prompt, and I asked it to create a visual graphic of the iceberg model. And this is what it came up with. Again, pretty visually stunning iceberg and a nice boat and like people under the water on the ice and things like that. But then you start reading the words and it's just nonsense, right? So once again, ChatGPT let us down on the on making a graphic of it. So Gemini did I would think an okay job of identifying the events: homelessness, individual, they're visible, people sleeping in the streets, panhandling, overcrowding. Again, this is the event. We can all see this. Patterns just below the surface that we're seeing increased rates of homelessness. So that's part of the pattern, cycle of hospitalization. So Gemini is coming up with basically the same thing, just a little bit formation difference. Structure, issues with policy or including policies, institutions contributing to the problem. I thought it did a really good job here with lack of affordable housing, adequate funding for mental health systems, especially here in the US. We're really underfunded in that. Gaps in a social safety net, criminalization again of homelessness, and stigma surrounding mental illness. And then they go into power dynamics, which I didn't give it the prompt to do that, but obviously in systems thinking that's a big thing that we need to discuss. And then mental models, it's basically the same thing that are individuals' beliefs and values, things like that. It's more on questions and not really answering it. So it goes a little bit off track. And then Claude decided to give us an iceberg model as kind of a graphic, and it's much more simple, right? That the events, obviously the visible people, crisis intervention, this is what in hospital admissions. So those are the events that we see associated with homelessness. The patterns is the cycling between streets and hospitals, increased severity during winter months, concentration in urban areas, higher rates in areas with housing shortages. Structure is inadequate mental health funding, housing affordability, fragmented social services, discharge policies without housing support, limited supportive housing options. Sorry, it's really small on my screen. And then finally, mental models, individual responsibility over social responsibility, mental illness stigma, housing as a commodity versus human right, and then NIMBY, which is an acronym for not in my backyard attitudes. So overall, probably ChatGPT in creating a iceberg model was the most comprehensive in this one, even though Claude did kind of structured it out for us in a graphic, and again, Gemini didn't do all that good. So the final prompt that I wanted to go over with you guys was creating a stakeholder map for homeless people with mental illness. So who are the stakeholders? So again, starting with ChatGPT, primary stakeholders in this, the direct impact, homeless individuals with mental health, friends and family, healthcare providers and shelters and housing programs. Secondary stakeholders, nonprofit organizations and charities, law enforcement, criminal justice, employers and workforce training programs, community and faith-based organizations. And then the final one is government and public agencies, legislators and policymakers, academic and researchers, and media and public awareness group. And then the follow-up prompt was to create a visual graphic of the stakeholder map for homeless people with mental illness. And this is what they came up with. Some red and blue bubbles with words you can't read. So, so again, ChatGPT is 0 for 3 on creating some sort of graphic. That's a real shortcoming of it. Just to let you know too that Gemini doesn't even try. If you actually ask it to create a graphic of what it just did, it recommends that you learn how to draw. Literally, it said that. Or use a computer program to make. So basically, go use Kumu, right? So, and then, so here's Gemini. It basically came up with the same things and formed it the same way. People who are directly involved, external stakeholders, like that. And that's all they had. And then finally, Claude. Well, actually, Claude did an excellent job with this. Starting with the community, religious organizations, advocacy groups, residents, and local business. And here's the homeless individual, and actually even categorize them to support advocacy, impact, and their impact. And then they come over here, and here's their direct support of family members, and then their interaction with the fire department. All the government stakeholders are over here, and then all the service providers over here, and how they're connected as well. And I thought that Claude once again did a really great job doing that. Before I get into the discussion questions, let me stop sharing for a second and to get anybody's feedback or questions about just I only used those 3 for today, but I've used Copilot. I've used just about all of them. So, but I felt like those 3 are the most readily available to everyone. So I use those 3 just to show you how they come up with different things. Any questions, comments, concerns, cries of outrage at this point? All right. Okay. Oh, yes, Jorge. Jorge, is that how you say it? No. Did I pronounce your name correctly though? All right, that's good. All right, great. So you then so for the rest of the uh time, I wanted to have a discussion. So hopefully I've come up with three discussion questions, hopefully to move this conversation forward. So discussion number one is how might we maintain critical thinking while leveraging AI capabilities? And I would love to hear your thoughts.
I think that the first question is to really understand what is the AI given me, and then ask if it makes sense or not. And it could be a good question for the students, and just like show them that you are not to believe everything that comes from the AI.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've seen with my students that's a real danger. And somebody mentioned it in the survey as well, that a lot of students look at AI as an endpoint, not as the beginning. And that I feel AI used that way really takes away critical thinking and is a misuse of AI. Jorge, have you seen that with your students as well, or what's been your experience?
I've read an article about some papers, research papers, where there was also with the legend uh, provided by ChatGPT. So the researcher never read really what the GPT gave. So it happens with people who is supposed to be very prepared. So it's more common with the students.
Yeah, there's been a lot of mistakes made with AI, and I think this year's Map the System competitions will be really interesting. My my hope is that the students using AI will be able to take their research to a whole new level, and we're going to see better maps and better uh, stakeholder maps, better feedback loops, and and hopefully it will systems thinking will become more accessible as well to students is one of my hopes. Anyone else in the audience like to?
There was in the chat one interesting question, and I
Oh,
think that this it could be used as another critical question for the students. What are the biases that you see in this map?
so the question in chat saying basically they don't know the field of housing insecurity. Would you say the answers provided by any or all of those chatbots were critical and nuanced? Uh, so I would say no. I think it was a very broad stroke, and I think I think AI does have the ability to get more nuanced, uh, but the one thing about AI is drilling down and getting your prompts more and more specific. And the way that I use AI a lot is as a trigger to do more research, and hopefully like I think like in a case study use like of proper AI is say that we make it do a stakeholder map, and maybe we like, oh, we didn't think about that, or I didn't realize that this was a stakeholder, um, and be able to increase the research on that. Lucy, you have your hand up. Would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really do love the points that you mentioned. Like people usually use ChatGPT as the endpoint. So it's kind of stop like our way to thinking and get the outcome. I also think the same way that we use it at the first point of contact is also harmful in that way. So the way that I use ChatGPT is right after I have all of my ideas I brainstorm and have like a skeleton and framework written down. I just add ChatGPT to make it smoothly and like a story appealing, but not adding or remove anything. And from there, I will continue to ask it like, is there any resources that tie from here? Like the resources link the article, the peer review article that can prove my points. And that is where I go to the ChatGPT reference and like kind of proof for my work that I already input the ideas in, and that's how I use ChatGPT, but not in the way that make it give the answer straight from there, but just have that as a source that can provide me the other resources that are available. Yeah, so that's just like my sharing.
Okay, thank you for that. That's great input. Lots of value. Thank you. Anyone else like to weigh in before we move to the next discussion question? So the second question that I would love to hear your thoughts on is, besides simple disclosures like, hey, I used AI and this is how I used it, how might we ensure academic integrity? All right. Let's see. I have one of my students in here, so I'm going to pick on her. Hopefully she can answer. I think she's at work. But Jocelyn, do you have any thoughts on it on disclosure or simple disclosure? Uh, what's your thoughts on that? On just how can we ensure academic integrity and transparency?
I mean, first of all, no fair picking on me like that. Um, Ensuring academic integrity, I think when you cite your use of AI, making sure that you can replicate the results that you got, is really important. And like you said earlier in your talk, making sure that the results that you get that you're using, you're double checking to ensure that they're unbiased, that they are accurate. Um, yeah, I guess that's really all I have to say.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. One way that we're using AI in with the group that I'm working with at FSU, which Jocelyn's one of them, is we're actually not using it at the beginning. We're actually we're trying to read as much as we can on the subject and doing research and things like that, and then following it up once we've written stuff and asking AI for feedback. Let me read this question in chat and then we'll go to Jorge. One thought from over here, maybe consistency with expectations allowances in the classroom might help students use it in a more meaningful way. Clarity on how, when it is allowed. I would love to actually to get some feedback from the students on that. How do you feel the instructors are doing, giving you guidelines in the use of AI? And do you have fear in using it, or are you being encouraged to use it? I'd love to hear from you guys. How about the big group, Cheryl's group? I'm calling on you. You're muted though.
I think it's we're gonna try to see how the mic works. Can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, thanks.
From what I hear from students is that it's just different. Maybe it's different depending on the institution, because I think some universities might have clear policies around it. But for a lot of students, they're ending up in situations where some professors have parameters about how to use AI or expectations and others don't. So there's a lot of confusion on how it can be used. There's not a uniform blanket approach. So I think it makes it difficult for students to know.
Does it make you fearful or nervous about using it? You had mentioned that being afraid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't ChatGPT go down last semester and the entire library went, ah! You can clearly tell everyone is using it, but it's how transparent you are about your usage.
Mm. Like some teachers, specifically in my experience, like they don't use AI at all. Like you can't use it at all in this class. While other classes I'm in are teaching us how to cite it and how to use it efficiently and responsibly. So yeah, there's like not any consistency with anything, it seems like.
What's your thoughts in a global competition like we're all part of, and different institutions having different guidelines and things like that? Do you have any thoughts on how we can maintain fairness?
I think it's gonna be hard to say banning it. Like you can say don't use it, but at the end of the day, you'll have so many people trying to use it, trying to be sneaky with it. So I think the best way to go forward with it is if you're using AI, use it responsibly. Make sure you're citing it. It gives you the option to use it if you want, and really looks at like, okay, go out, use it responsibly. If we do find you're not using it responsibly, then that's a disqualification.
Yeah, maybe there's a rubric category about it, and then you're acknowledging that it.
They do have a part of the rubric is the bibliography. So if you have fake citations and that sort of stuff, they can catch you that way. But I do think these types of workshops I think are really helpful, because I think a lot of students don't realize their gaps in their own knowledge on a topic, and they present these findings without validating them, and they don't realize how off they are. And so if we assume that people are going to use them, but we give them the tools to use them effectively, there might be less fear in using them, and there might be less using it as cheating, because they'll recognize that, as you were saying before, the standard can go up pretty quickly, but only if people are using it to sort of validate or check or expand versus to just do the work, because just doing the work is pretty basic. Anyway, see some other people. Any other thoughts in the room? No? We'll mute ourselves.
Let's go to Jorge, and then we'll go to we'll answer Walker's question, or we'll talk about Walker's question. Jorge?
I think that it's important to show the students how to use properly the AI, and also don't satanize it, because in some cases we forbid the use of AI, and it increases the use of AI just by forbidding it. So I would say that if we show them how to use it, and also we learn from them how to use it, because many times they have better ideas about it, and we discuss possibilities of this tool to increase the quality of our work, it would be a good discussion and a good starting point to assure the proper use of AI.
Thank you for that, Jorge. Let's see. We'll talk about Walker's comment, then we'll go over to Joshua. Walker says, does it also put more onus, good word, on those who are judging the research to do so more, even more critically? Because the AI response looks good to the untrained eye. I don't, does anybody have any thoughts on that? Do you think this raises the bar for judges? Yeah, or I think it'll be interesting. Like, one thing that I think is good about it is like, especially with the Claude example that we saw of the stakeholder map. I think it's not perfect, but it gives you it's a good teaching tool, right? That at least for me, a lot of times, just having an example like that, and that's different than just kind of a standard stakeholder map, is really helpful to expand the idea of how you can do these things. Yeah, Joshua, what's your thoughts?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Sorry, just to answer the thing about ensuring academic integrity.
Yes.
At Corpus, one of my professors, she has a method that I actually find really effective. And it's essentially where anytime a student uses AI, we're encouraged to use AI for, say, for example, generating prompts to projects. But any prompts that we put into, say, ChatGPT or Claude, we have to photograph both the prompt and the exact result that the AI gives us, and that we submit with our assignment so she can directly see how it's used.
Oh, interesting. That's a good thought. Thanks for sharing that. Great. Okay, let's go to the final discussion question. And that is, how do you guys think AI will impact this year's MTS competition?
I think, and sorry to just speak out of turn, I think everyone will be using it. I think, you know, you'd be dumb not to, in a way.
Okay.
I've
Thanks,
used
Justin.
it to not only generate ideas, but you can customize your stakeholder map if there's something you want to change because it doesn't look quite right. I know, well, I typically use Claude, and in Claude you can tell it what you want it to do, how you want it to look, which is a really valuable tool.
Great. Other people's thoughts? How AI is going to impact this year's competition? Does anybody think that let me ask you this in a different way. Are you expecting the submissions to be of better quality this year, or do you think that this is going to be a step backwards because people are kind of going to use AI as an endpoint? What's your thoughts? I can go back to Cheryl's group. You guys are talkers. You got opinions.
Yeah, we got a lot of opinions. Personally, I mean, for one, it was there last year at the competition, the Canadian competition we had. It was present, and I think the super strong students are super interested and passionate about the topic. So if they do use AI in support of their passion project, and so I think that it becomes difficult to tell a really compelling story if you don't really truly understand the material. And so even if AI is a tool that's useful for generating some stuff, if you can't wrap your head around the issue, you're not going to do as strong a job. You're not going to move past the sort of first or second stage of the competition, certainly in the Canadian context, without the ability to make a compelling story that other people can understand, and also to answer the questions that the judges put forth, because the judges will inquire into it in a way that will test their knowledge. And I think for the students who don't realize, that's the big thing about ChatGPT, people don't know what they don't know. They're going to get really surprised by those questions, I think. So
that's an excellent point.
Anyway, with you guys, it's your first time going at it, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I know these guys want to learn, so that's why we're here on a Friday afternoon as a group. So I think
I thought you just wanted to hang out with me.
Also, obviously, but I think that the really strong students. I mean, to me, the whole thing about Map the System is how remarkable the students are, who are really driven. And then the rest, like I just think on our end, in terms of managing these submissions, we're going to have a lot of people that we're going to just disqualify right away based on poor, superficial submissions. When they think, oh, I got a good one, I'll just be able to eliminate those ones right away, but based on, having seen this for the last 2 years pretty consistently. So those folks will be disappointed because they think they're winning, but then they haven't seen the quality of the work that good students do, which is always stands out.
I think just to add on to that as well, like as students, like we really get, when we're looking at systems, we really have to understand all the content, do so much background checks, like lots of information on all aspects of things. And so looking at students are busy, so for time management situations, they might just use AI to help me summarize this information and make it go by quicker. But to really understand systems, the work has to be put in, and we have to read lots, look at different angles, and that requires more time as well. So that's when you can also tell how much you know your topics by how much time you put into it.
Great insight. Thank you. Anybody else like to share their thoughts before we move on?
Yes, I think that we will have mixed results, some bad results because some of them will be without any critical thinking and just what the AI provides, so it could be bad. And also others that could be very good. Cheryl said something important that has to do with emotion, with how compelled are you to your theme. And I think that this is important, and this is not given by the AI, but if you are really compelled to try to solve something, this tool could be an excellent tool to go deeper, but it's not just to question the AI. You have to make some primary source research, interviews and things like that are not provided by this tool. So I think that is some of them very good and some of them very bad.
Great, thank you, Jorge. All right, so here's the survey link. I would absolutely love it if you would take the survey. I am hoping that this will turn into a paper So, and be a valuable resource to further the conversation about this. So give you a second to get your cameras out and take pictures. Let's see, 3, 2, 1. And then the final slide, if you want access to this deck, you can scan this QR code and get the deck. And then also there's my email and my LinkedIn as well. So you get the deck, and I will turn it back over to Ashley with 1 minute left. If nothing else, I finished on time.
Yeah, exactly. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes we get very lost into subject sometimes. So
I
yes,
gotta get to
thank you so
happy
much.
hour. I'm sensitive to that. So,
There you
well, not
go.
for you guys. It's probably early for you guys.
It is early for us still in the day, but yeah, thank you so much, Mark. That was great. I think it gave us a lot to kind of think about when it comes to the competition and what AI is going to, you know, bring to the table this year. I know it's definitely conversations that we are having with judges this year, but I do agree. I think you'll notice it when students are answering the question period, if they actually have understood the material or not. So I think the Q&A is more important than ever in this competition this year. So thank you so much for everyone that joined. I will stay on for a while. If you have any specific Map the System Canada questions, feel free to hang out and ask me questions. Yeah, it was good to see everyone. Thanks so much for coming.
All right. Thanks, everyone.